We're going to go ahead and get started. I first of all want to apologize to everybody and give you all super big gold stars for hanging in there with us this Monday. Um, we did have a few technical issues, obviously, with webinar, and I do want to thank everyone's patience and in particular, a troubleshooter from my office at Cornell Cooperative Extension, Rensselaer County, Nicola
Uh,
Sigoloni.
Hello, everyone.
So without further ado, I do want to I'm going to cut some of my script short only because I know we all signed up for a specific time frame. I want to just mention that I'm Bernie Wiesen. I am a Cornell Cooperative Extension staff member. I'm the executive director in a county called Rensselaer, and it is my pleasure to serve as the JSEP president this current year. And as a result, we have been lucky enough to have the cooperation of Dr. Doug Steele and actually also Christina Laridaen, who has offered and been able to provide a follow-up webinar to what we did in July to kind of give extension staff across the country an opportunity to receive federal updates. As you know, everything changes in our world. That's one thing we can always count on. But we've also seen a lot of escalated changes, it appears, at the federal level. So this is a follow-up, yet it does stand alone. So you wouldn't have to listen from July to know and get good messaging for the session today. I want to also put in just a little bit of a commercial. Joint Council of Extension Professionals is comprised of 7 professional associations that represent different elements of cooperative extension work. Those 7 associations are the National Extension Association of Family and Consumer Sciences, the National Association of County Agriculture Agents, Epsilon Sigma Phi, the Association of Natural Resource Extension Professionals, National Association of Community Development Extension Professionals, National Association of Extension Program and Staff Development Professionals, and the National Association of Extension 4-H Youth Development Professionals, of which I find myself the reason for being here because that is the association that is my home. I also want to make sure that all are kind of aware that this JSEP group, our intention is to elevate Extension's national reputation as an organization of excellence and synergistically leverage the strengths of member associations to foster leadership, collaboration, professional development, scholarly activities, strategic partnerships, and advocate for the professions. I also want to mention that we do have an upcoming conference this coming month. It's the Public Issues and Leadership Development Conference provide every year. So some of your faces, we may see you in a couple of weeks. And I just want to then transition and introduce our wonderful panelists. First of all, we've got Dr. Doug Steele, who will be our first panel speaking. Dr. Doug Steele is the Vice President for Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources for the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, or APLU. Prior to his current role, Steele held positions as Director of the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, Vice President for External Relations, and Director of Extension at Montana State University, and Extension faculty positions at Colorado State University and Purdue University. As Vice President for FANR, Doug provides leadership and support to the Commission on Food, Environmental, and Renewable Resources, or CFERR, the Board on Agriculture Assembly and its sections and committees, the Board on Human Sciences, and the Board on Natural Resources with a primary focus on advocacy, messaging, external partnerships, and liaisons to the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Doug has been active on several national committees, providing leadership to issues of policy and program budgets, including chair of the Extension Committee on Organization and Policy, or ECOP, co-chair of the ECOP National Marketing and Communications Task Force, chair of E-Extension, chair of the National 4-H Congress Board of Directors, and trustee for the National 4-H Council. He has received several distinguished awards, including the ESP Visionary Leadership Award, when he was at Montana State Extension, the F.A. Anderson Distinguished Service Award at Colorado State Extension, and the C. Peter McGrath University Community Engagement Award while he's been at APLU. ESP Visionary Leadership Award while he was at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, and National Association of Extension Family and Consumer Science Friend of Extension, and the USDA Superior Service Award. Doug and his wife Lori reside in Bowie, Maryland, and have 4 grown children. So I would say Dr. Steele's pretty qualified to be speaking on the variety and the breadth of the extension reach across the country. So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you also to Christina Laridaen. Christina is a trusted advisor to clients and community leaders in agriculture, environment, conservation, and resilience topics. She supports Lewis and Burke clients by providing in-depth information about actions in Congress and at federal agencies and strategizing new initiatives and positioning for success. Christina is a key member of the firm's agriculture practice and is intimately familiar with the ins and outs of research, education, and extension policy within USDA, NEFA, ARS, and NRCS. Additionally, she has extensive experience assisting clients with strategies to support environmental and ecosystem sciences, including through diversifying funding via lesser-known funding streams for this work across the federal agencies. The issues: agriculture extension, environment, and climate issues across agencies, resilience, oceanic and coastal research, environmental health and justice, and geosciences. Before joining the Lewis and Burke team, Christina interned in the U.S. Senate, where she assisted in the research commodity and conservation titles in the 2018 Farm Bill, in addition to covering regulation of bioengineered foods. Christina is a proud graduate of the University of Minnesota, where she studied political science and applied economics. Her congressional experience traces all the way back to her high school days when she served as a United States Senate page. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over first to Dr. Steele.
Thank you, Bernie. Wonderful job handling all the acronyms and getting us through those introductions. The very most important thing about Christina is she is a former 4-H member and credits her 4-H experience to a lot of the skills that she has today. We've worked with her firm, Lewis Burke Associates, for in our 4th year now. Christina has been the lead with all things extension, just been a wonderful partner in that. And if you've been to the field before, she served on panels and she's spoken before the group. And I just really appreciate her partnership and her friendship on the work that we do. Let me clarify, Bernie, do we have a full hour? Do you want to cut it down to 30 minutes, 45 minutes?
I'm going to say we started around 2:30-ish and we were scheduled to go about an hour plus. So
Okay.
I would say I wouldn't ask you to cut down too much.
Okay.
I think we'll be okay.
Great. Well, I'll tell you what, throughout my career, I've enjoyed being part of Extension and thoroughly enjoyed working with the Extension faculty and staff. If I was in the classroom right now, I have no doubt you would have probably walked out about 15 minutes ago. And the thing about Extension folks, you kind of stay in the game, you're patient, and I appreciate Bernie and Nikolai doing a workaround to help us get this seminar going. I wanted to share with you, as the title indicates, what are we seeing now in policy funding, and really more importantly, ending with what is the value of extension, because we need you and we need your voice at the county level, within your districts and regions, at the state level, because I often say that my job is to connect and develop relationships at the federal level. Your job is to help us get the votes that we need for our funding and initiatives to pass. The work I do are mainly with the committees and committee staffs and committee chairs. The work you do is inform your representatives and senators so that when it comes time for a vote, that they are very supportive of what we do. And the system is a great system. It's worked well. And in spite of what I used to saw, the chaos, I'm saying now a complex environment, I think we have a lot of opportunities to really make some headway. And I'm coming to you from the downtown Hyatt Regency in New Orleans, where I'm attending the 50th Biennial Research Symposium for the 1890 Associate Research Directors. It's been a great event. 1,800 people here. 14 of the 19, 1890 land-grant university presidents are here. All of the deans representing their schools are here, and it's just a fantastic event. And so this is my venue for today to be able to join you. I want to share with you a little bit, and Nikolai,
We can see your screen. Doug.
yeah, my PowerPoint does not want to proceed. What do I do?
Did you try to press the right button on your
There we go.
keyboard?
Okay, there we go. So I want to talk very quickly about APLU. We're a membership organization. We are actually the oldest higher ed association in North America. What's interesting about APLU is we grew out of the 1887 Hatch Act, which provided funding for research programs at land-grant universities. And the research directors decided if they want to grow that funding, they need to get a whole lot closer to DC, and they started a working subcommittee that from 1887 has had a continual presence in DC. What do we do at the association? We focus on increasing access, equity, completion, and workforce readiness with our land grant students. We promote scientific research, and then I think of most interest to extension is community engagement and economic development. And so we have a very loud voice. We've been very active. And if you look specifically at the numbers, we have 248 members. We represent all 50 states, Canada, and Mexico. 220 universities, and so the other members are university systems. There's 25 of those university systems. All 100 plus U.S. land-grant institutions are part of what we do. That includes all of the 1862 land grants, all the 1890 land grants, all the 1994 land grants. And then you see that we have 8 Canadian members, 5 Mexican universities, and 23 HCBUs. Add them all up, and on the ag side, we represent about 115 colleges and universities. I'm not going to leave this up too long because you'll get a headache looking at it, but I want to show you we do have a structure, and Bernie talked about that a little bit. We are comprised among these 5 boards. Obviously, for extension, the board on ag assembly is the one you're most interested in, and if you scroll down, you will see we have a cooperative extension section that is represented by the Extension Committee on Organizational Policy, which is called ECOP. So what's our advocacy look like? Well, we work very closely with Burke Associates, and we put together an advocacy timeline, key decision points on when we need to provide information and when we need to take action. We review the president's executive budget request, which we've been told will come out this week. Historically, it comes out sometime around Valentine's Day, but historically that hasn't happened since I've been in DC 8 years now. So we are looking at that. Why it's important, it kind of frames what the executive office is thinking on where federal funds should be expended. And to be honest with you, last year it was not really helpful to us. In fact, we got a critical review from the executive office, and we have really good friends in Congress and on committee staff, and they made sure we did not experience the kind of reductions in federal funding that the president proposed. The one good thing that happened last year for us in the big, beautiful bill that was passed on a reconciliation, we did receive for the first time ever $125 million in the Research Facilities Act. That's $125 million annually, mandatory for 9 years. It also has to be matched, and many states are trying to struggle with that match. But when you look at 125 million, all of a sudden becoming 250 million, that's $250 million that we'll be able to invest in ag research infrastructure over the next 9 years. And if you in a state where you share regional offices, much like we did in Texas and in Montana and in Colorado, then you see the extension has a lot to gain also by investing in infrastructure, which includes labs, office space, facilities for meetings. A lot of good work will come out of that money. Right now, we're looking for the farm bill to come back out of the parking lot, and it's slowly getting back on the highway. And Christina will share a little bit about that later. And then we have a committee called the Budget and Advocacy Committee, and that's the group that helps us set our priority funding issues for the next year, and then they set the advocacy agenda. So if you ever come to the CARET meeting, you probably saw the Unified Ask, which is one of the publications they put out. And we also make the Unified Ask available during PILs, so you could take that during your visits with congressional offices. So what are capacity funding and why are they so important for us? The major funder of land-grant universities, extramural funding comes from the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, USDA. They have an annual budget of about $2 billion, about 900 million, so not quite one half of their budget goes to support these capacity lines. The other half of their budget, 425 million of that goes to the AFRI program, which is an Ag and Food Research Initiative. And of that, about 85% comes to land grant universities. And then NIFA has over 70 individual funding lines. And so at the end of the day, out of the $2 billion in NIFA, about 1.85 billion comes to our land grant universities, a very important partner. And so capacity funds are historic funds given to every university based on a distribution formula. And it is to support 1862 research in the Hatch Fund, support Smith-Lever Act of 1914 for extension. In the 1890s, it's Evans-Allen's capacity research grants, which was actually funded first in 1977. And then agricultural cooperative extension programs at the 1890s, which is their equivalent to Smith-Lever funding. Also, a capacity funding grant is called McIntyre-Stennis. That's for forestry research. And so in some states, that may actually go to your public university if they're the ones that do forestry programs. So when I was at Montana State University, most of that money went to the University of Montana in Missoula with the cooperative partnership with Montana State University. So this is why capacity is important. And I'm spending a whole lot more time on capacity than I did in July when we had this presentation, because we have decided to make capacity, increasing federal funding capacity, a major priority for FY28. And so for that to happen, we went through a phase one and we asked all the universities, how do you use capacity and why is it important? And Friday of last week, we just released our phase two survey about what are the impacts and return on investments of capacity funding. And to put this into perspective, we have done a self-reported survey with Extension, and it looks like about 91% of all Extension employees, county and state and regional based, have some percentage of capacity funding on them. So I can tell you why capacity funding is so critical. And we're looking at the success we had in the Research Facilities Act to lift up capacity. And so as you start hearing and seeing more what we're doing when you come to PILD this year, you're going to hear us talk about capacity. And the important thing for us is we need you to understand what it is. We need you to communicate to your state legislators, because they will have a big voice in how we start framing this on the federal level. So this is the most dramatic, is how much we have lost in funding over the years. And as I just said, loss in capacity funding and extension is usually loss of positions. But this administration would like to see more efficiency and probably less people working. And so what our message will be, loss of capacity equals loss of programs and equals loss of impact to the constituent groups that we work with. And I'll share more of that with you as we get later in the presentation. So what do we do with capacity? What would happen if capacity funds increase? Well, we could have more faculty. We could have more county agents, graduate students. We can fund specific projects. And this is what your leadership has told us they'd like to do. What we find out in capacity funding and extension, it means people. In research, it means more research projects. And so that is a balance of communication we're trying to talk about moving forward. And as I just said, the administration is not concerned about less people, but they are concerned about, are we having effective program impact? And so you're going to be a very important part of that message as we build it out. So what are the key takeaways for capacity? One, capacity provides stable funding and can be seen as national security. It's capacity funding that allows our extension administrators and research directors to leverage that with the county and state matches. It allows us a secure source of funding if you need to pivot very quickly to an emerging issue or a need, such as responding to a natural disaster, impacts or insects or pests or other things that happen in your state. It's foundational for all that we do in extension. Cooperative extension capacity fundings allow us to have a network of county agents. It allows us to have a robust 4-H program, and allows you an extension to work on other priorities of family and consumer health, financial management, ag profitability, positive youth development, and strengthening our communities. Federal capacity, as I said, are highly leveraged, not just in funding sources, but in partnerships and external stakeholders that can participate in areas that are important and established either through your local committee structure or through the state office and how they collect information on priority needs for your state. And then finally, these investments create safeguards for the future. I had somebody tell me that we love competitive research, but when that research project is finished and the funding is gone after 3 years, maybe 5 years, then who has ownership and what remains? And the thing that we've done with our capacity funds is maintain that core structure of organization within the counties, of employees for research-based funding to create opportunities to expand varieties, new growing techniques to help with water resource management. So there's a lot of different areas you're going to see. And as we start growing out this message, you're going to hear more and more and more about the common language that we need to establish from our county offices all the way to the federal level. The capacity funding is necessary for national security. It's foundational for the basic work that you do. It's highly leveraged in our communities and states, and it helps us have safeguards for the future. So I also want to throw in here real quick, and I think you've probably heard about the National Land Grant Impact Database. It's an incredible database. Everybody has a system input person at your state office. We're always asking them to help us identify impacts and ways that we can promote what we do that is more easily searchable and identifiable at the national level. And so we're going to be providing you more information about how you can submit impact reports to your state office that can then be inputted in the national survey. Last year, I think we broke 1,700 impact reports. In comparison, about 3 years ago, we had about 450 or 500. And so we are really trying to make sure people understand the amazing work we do, the impacts that we make, and help support that through the National Impact Database. We're also working on a multi-year visioning document. I did share this with you back in July. Ag Innovation, which is formerly known as the Ag Experiment Stations, they rebranded themselves a couple years ago, are working on a research roadmap. Extension was working on a 25 to 35 roadmap. And what we want to do is bring those two together so we have a consistent unifying message. We also have the importance of academic programs as part of that message in the cross-cutting way that our academic or teaching programs work both with extension and research. We're going to use this multi-year document to show why capacity funding has been critical over time and why it's critical into the future. We're looking for interdisciplinary opportunities that we can share with others. And the bottom line is we want to showcase the ability of us to address national concerns in food, ag, natural resources, and human sciences. For several years, we've talked about extension being the best kept secret. We can no longer allow that to happen. We've got to be one of the most notable parts of the federal government when it comes to extending information and knowledge to clientele groups across the state. And to make this happen, we need your engagement and participation. And I thank you, one, for making the time today to be part of this webinar, but for your involvement in JSEP. I've always believed that professional development is an important aspect of what we do and how we maintain not only our relevancy, but our success in the future. And as you come into the PIL time, if you're coming to PIL this year, we will have opportunities to share more with you, and we'll work with the JSEP leadership to see if there are more topics that we can offer in webinars throughout the course of the year. So Bernie said, talk very quickly about opportunities for extension. Well, you got to continue your programs that impact your communities. That's what people look at. Continue to strengthen local partnerships. We have emerging areas of ag profitability, nutrition, health, and community development. Positive youth development is really turning into what do we do to prepare successful citizens and students of the future. So workforce readiness, skill development, even project work that helps young people develop skills and confidence are so important. We got to be sure that we're addressing rural areas, local issues. And I like to ask myself, if we weren't there, if extension wasn't there, would there be somebody that could step in and fill the gap? And in most cases, that answer is no. and we got to continue to be a trusted source of reliable information. I want to put out really quickly, December 30th last year, Secretary Rollins announced the 5 research priorities for USDA. You can see them all right here. And if you look at those priority areas, I hope you can see where extension fits. It's imperative that we align what we do with the language that's important to this administration. So profitability, expanding markets, protecting American agriculture, promoting soil health, and improving health, human health through precision nutrition. All of these is what extension does. It's all what we've done for a long time. It's the foundation of our work, and we got to align our impacts with what this administration is saying important to them. And so we're positioning for long-term success through a multi-year strategy. And we're going to ask you to help us in developing this message by developing one-pagers that you have available. And I'll send you a summary of all this. And finally, I want to end with, we got to be forward focused. The horizon reminds us where we're doing today, but we have to increase opportunities so we can reach tomorrow together. So with that, I know that was quick. Thank you for listening and staying engaged with us. And I think, Bernie, I'm going to let Christina, and then we will monitor the chat and look for additional questions. So, Christina, I'm going to pass it to you.
Sounds good. Anything else you need, Bernie, before I share my slides?
I do just really want to hope that people
Sure, go
do
for it.
put questions in chat. I am watching it. Before we move on, I do have one question, and maybe Christina or Doug, if you could answer that. With the Research Facility Act and the request for it to be match-based, where is that match coming from in most instances, or do you know yet? Is that a form of state and local dollars or privatization?
I can take a stab, Doug, if you want. So that's going to be dependent on each individual institution and the project they are proposing. We don't have the solicitation out yet. I was just talking with USDA late last week, and they were heavily implying that it would come very, very soon. So I'm taking that to mean in the next month or so. They will get more specific, and if there are any limitations on where the match can come from, they will indicate as such. But we have been, raising the concern that a one-to-one match on a potentially multi-million-dollar award is a big ask. So I would guess that they will make it relatively open where the match could come from. But it will be up to the institution if they're able to get private investments. If you have a lot of agribusiness in your state and you're able to get the match from there, I'm sure that would be very welcome. State match would be welcome. But we'll ultimately have to see what's allowed by the solicitation. The other thing that's usually not allowed is like a federal match. So if you have an NSF award, you usually couldn't leverage that to be a match,
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I will work on sharing my screen here. Hopefully, does this look right?
We can see it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what we're going to chat about today is, of course, getting a little bit more in the weeds, the kind of nuts and bolts of how this works and where we're at with regard to Congress, the agencies, and how what the federal government is doing impacts the work that you all do and how we can best kind of advocate. I think knowing the state of play, knowing kind of where things are at right now will help us to be good advocates in the future. So let's advance my slides. There we go. So where we are at now, of course, the Trump administration has been in power for a little over a full year now. So 15 months. They've had 200 executive orders so far, or in the first year, which is pretty comparable to what they had their entire first term. This was pretty much all over the news. We were scrambling on the government relations side to try to keep up with all of these executive orders because it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. They were releasing executive orders at a crazy pace. I will say we have really seen that drop off because you spend a couple of years preparing all these executive orders, but eventually you will run out of the ones that you had in the queue. So they have slowed down a bit, but it has certainly been a lot. We've also seen under Trump 2.0 a much more stable cabinet and White House staff, whereas under the first administration it was really marred by a lot of resignations, a lot of people moving around. We haven't seen that as much, which has been really helpful in some ways because we've been able to build stronger relationships with some of these folks. Agency officials have gotten confirmed, so we've been able to they've been able to make decisions. I will say the caveat with that is that everybody saw what happened with Doge early last year. A lot of grant terminations, cancellations, questions about where funding was going, why things were terminated, that type of thing. While Doge kind of in name is not really around anymore, what it is effectively is now is a very powerful OMB, which is the Office of Management and Budget. This is the office that normally I would never, ever in a million years think that I would be talking about on a webinar because it is so in the weeds that why does anybody need to know about the OMB? But this is because the OMB is basically the funnel through which all federal dollars are allocated to the agencies. And OMB has become massively politicized under the Trump administration in a way that it hasn't before. It's not necessarily illegal to have a very powerful OMB, but it's never been used in this way. And so OMB, again, because they're the filter through which money goes, has basically been putting holds on sending money to the agencies, usually because it doesn't align with the Trump administration's priorities. So thinking about different DEI funds, climate funds, things like that. So that's kind of where the holdup has been. And as a result of some of those executive orders, we've seen additional pauses related to, again, having political sign off on basically all money that flows. So that requirement is slowing solicitations down. It slows down grant funding. It's why, for those of you that are kind of at the administration level, we saw the capacity fund solicitations were a little bit late this year. If you have ever gone after AFRI funds, that solicitation was a little bit late, or was quite a bit late. All of this kind of ties back to that, and I'll talk more about slowdowns at the agencies and how they're really kind of recovering from that. But switching over to Congress, so right now, this whole year, everything is very focused on the midterms, which are going to be happening in November. We're expecting some potentially large shifts, which I'll get into later, but just kind of keeping that in mind for your timeline for the year that we've got elections in November. Congress did finish 11 out of its 12 fiscal year 2026 appropriations bills. So these are the 12 bills that fund the entirety of the federal government. USDA and the bill that funds USDA was one of the very first to be passed. It was actually passed last calendar year, late last calendar year. So that was great. We got full funding. I'll talk a little bit more about the details of what was in there a little bit later. The only one that is left unfinished, as I think everybody is aware, is the Homeland Security bill. That's why your TSA lines are so long if you have been to the airport recently. So they're still working on getting that done. We thought we had a deal this last weekend. We don't. So that still needs to get finished very soon here. And they're also starting the process for fiscal year 2027 appropriations. So this whole process to fund the government happens every single year, and we're right at the beginning of that process. It's all starting over again. We, of course, also have the Farm Bill to do. I'll talk more about that later. National Defense Authorization Act, another must-pass defense bill that passes every year. So there's a lot on the agenda and a lot of things sucking up energy, especially, again, we've got those elections coming up in November, which means that Congress is not going to be here very often because they take a lot of what's called recess to go back and to spend time campaigning. So that's kind of where we are now, what we're looking at for the upcoming year, but I'll get more in depth on all of these items as we go through. So taking a look at some of the key players right now in the ag world in Congress. So this is your leadership team when it comes to all things agriculture. And I'll take a moment here to kind of distinguish between the groups of four that we have here, to also talk about the difference between authorizing and appropriations. So appropriations, whenever you hear that word, think funding. This is the funding committees, and then the ag committee actually doesn't have nearly as much to do with funding. It's all about ag policy. How does USDA work? What new programs are they creating? Authorizations for those programs, because you have to authorize the government to be able to spend money on a certain thing. So your first team on the left here, with Chair Bozeman and Ranking Member Klobuchar, those are the team kind of setting policy, and then the Ag Approps leadership, Chairman Hoeven and Ranking Member Shaheen, those are your kind of money leadership in the Senate. Some of the big things that we're noting here: major turnover happening in this leadership team, but also further down on the committee. Especially on the Democratic side, we've got a lot of movement across all the Dems. Senator Klobuchar, of course, running for governor. Angie Craig is running for the Senate seat. So everybody's doing a shift there. Senator Shaheen on the Dem side for Approps is retiring. Chairman Thompson on the Republican side for the House, technically, he is term limited on being the ag chair any further. He's likely to get a waiver, but I kind of ramble on that for a second to give you an idea that there's going to be a lot of movement in the next calendar year. So if you are in a state that you are like, my state is not on this list, so I don't have any power when it comes to ag, everything is about to change, and it is changing so much that it is hard to even predict who's next in line. So we, of course, have kind of a tiger team to try to engage these states, because members of Congress always like to hear from their constituents. But everything is changing up, and new people will become important every single day. So we will see how things shake out. But hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of the fluctuations that we're going to have in the next year and kind of where leadership is right now. All right, this is the chart that everybody likes to look at. I promise you this is probably my ugliest slide, but this is the slide that everybody likes to see. This is the funding, this is the appropriations amount that we're sitting at right now. So right now we're kind of in a weird lull before the chaos. So we're at the starting line for fiscal year 2027. As I mentioned, fiscal year 2026 is done and completed. That is this, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but that is this little pink box on the far right. All of these, those are the final appropriations numbers for fiscal year 2026. So these are the appropriations levels that USDA is operating with for this fiscal year. So you can see for extension, the main things that we want to be paying attention to here are Smith-Lever on down. So Smith-Lever, of course, funding at the 1862s, the 1890s here at 72 million. These are in millions, I should clarify. So tack 3 extra zeros on the bottom of all of these. And then extension services at 1994 actually did receive a $1 million increase. So that's great to see. But everything else was largely flat. This has been a really tight fiscal environment. They aren't, the committees have been directed to effectively not add any increases. So AFRI did take a slight haircut for those of you who compete and receive AFRI funds of about $10 million. That is not great. In the grand scheme of things, though, that's a pretty small haircut. There were other parts of USDA that got much bigger cuts. Of course, SNAP and some of the nutrition funding got some bigger cuts. There were other parts of the agencies that saw much larger cuts. So in the grand scheme of things, our priorities were relatively well protected. As we head into fiscal year 2027, the year that we're prepping for, getting ready for right now, we have our requests all set. They're about the same as what we asked for the last year. So again, the green box is what we're kind of asking for approximately for this upcoming year. We're expecting the president's budget request to come out as soon as this Friday. The president's budget request is a political document. It is the president's wish list for if the president had the purse strings, which he does not, Congress does, but if he did, this is how he would spend the money. Over the last, 2 decades at this point, the budget request has become a very political document rather than an actual legitimate proposal, which means they will make huge cuts and huge increases in certain areas to indicate their political their goals and their priorities, but it's not necessarily something that Congress will actually take up. So I'll give you an example. Last year, right here, you can see Hatch Act, $0. Oops. $0 in the president's budget request for Hatch Act for the experiment stations. That, of course, did not end up coming to fruition, but it freaks everybody out, and I completely understand. It would freak me out. And again, the same thing sort of happened with extension, not as dramatic, but extension got cut massively. I will tell you now, on Friday, I do anticipate that will be the case again. We have been hearing that it's going to be the same, really dramatic cuts. Congress has never gone along with these dramatic cuts, not under this administration, not under the first Trump administration, and even under Democratic administrations, under the Biden administration. They proposed massive growth in some areas. That didn't happen either. So I just want to emphasize that. It's not that we don't take it seriously. We absolutely do. But I will just say that these kinds of massive cuts don't usually come to fruition. It's more of a messaging of this is where I want my priorities to align with. We're anticipating the budget hearings will happen in April. So this is where USDA officials will have to come to Congress. So we usually get some more intel on their thinking, and we like to ask questions. So if these kinds of numbers happen again, we like to plant questions with the members of Congress who are champions for us to have them hold the administration accountable and say, you proposed this massive cut to extension. Do you realize what that would do to my people, to my constituents, to my farmers? Do you realize the impact that would have? Why would you propose these dramatic cuts? So we like to plant questions like that, and that's something we will certainly engage you all for help with. And we expect draft bills from Congress, which again, Congress has those purse strings. So once those draft bills come out, we anticipate that in the spring and summer. Those will be the ones that we really want to be paying attention to. Those are the more real proposals. So we'll of course keep you all posted as those drafts come out. The other thing that I'll note, and I'll mention this again too at the end for your final takeaways, is because it's an election year, August and October, the entire months of August and October will be recess months, which means Congress will not be here. I know, will not be here in DC. They will be back home in their states campaigning. So that shortens the legislative calendar for the legislating that they can get done, but it does give you all a great opportunity to actually see your members of Congress, talk to them in person, invite them to campus, invite them out to your experiment station. If you have any farmers that are huge champions that would invite you, when they come do farm tours, all of that kind of stuff, your state fairs, county fairs, all of those kinds of things are great opportunities to get some face time with the members and their staff. And so August, and they're always there in August, but they will also be there in October this year. So try to catch them when you can. Okay, so that's all on spending. I can of course answer any questions, but want to move on and talk a little bit about Farm Bill and then USDA. So Farm Bill progress, of course, has been really slow moving. We did just have the House Ag Committee marked up their draft bill just, what was that? About a month ago, 3-ish weeks ago, marked up their bill and passed it out of committee. They got 7 Democrats to vote in favor, which is 3 more than they got in 2024, which was actually kind of surprising. We didn't expect them to necessarily get that many. So that actually bodes pretty well for they may take one last final swing to try to get something done before the election, or potentially even, tee something up to get it passed right after the election so that their members can take things home, especially those Republican members are really desperate to have something to bring back because it's going to be tight for a lot of them. So we're anticipating that we may see some progress and some movement on the Farm Bill this year. TBD on if it actually passes, but I anticipate that we'll see another draft coming out of the Senate here in the next couple of months, again, so that members have something to take back home and campaign on. But so far, the Farm Bill, we're kind of in a holding pattern. The APLU extension priorities were very well represented in all of the drafts, continue to be. One of the big ones that people always ask me about is 4-H name and emblem, protecting 4-H name and emblem. That is in there, continues to be in the packages. Essentially, they keep recycling the same draft and reintroducing it. So all of our things continue to be well represented in that. The big downside is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that, as many of you all know, cut SNAP education. The drafts that we have seen so far don't do anything to address not only SNAP education, but any of the SNAP changes that were made in that bill. I anticipate it will likely remain that way so long as Republicans are fully in charge. Should the House and or Senate flip, we've got new questions about what will happen to SNAP. I do anticipate that SNAP will remain the priority, not necessarily SNAP education, but there are many conversations going ongoing to kind of talk about what the future of staff education is, but did want to make sure that I mentioned those as well. And again, if there's any questions, happy to get more in the weeds on that, but want to make sure we're moving along here. So real quick on what's happening at USDA, we've got Scott Hutchins in as the head of REE. So he has been a longtime friend of the community, knows the land-grant universities, has previously was involved in the Entomological Society, so he knows how organizations like ours work. And in general, he was a really positive nomination for our community, so we're glad to see him there. And he's thus far been a good champion for science, is very concerned about the ag pipeline, the ag STEM pipeline. So all of that, he's been a really great champion, and hope to continue to have him be a big friend of the organization. Touching on some of the other last couple USDA things, of course, the USDA priorities, Doug already walked through those 5 major research priority areas. I will also mention, relevant to a lot of you all, is that this America First and MAHA initiative continues to kind of play out at USDA. I will say, with regard to MAHA, that's the Make America Healthy Again initiative. Has a lot to do with nutrition, a lot to do with shortening ag supply chains, a lot to do with preventative health. All of those things, of course, that Extension cares about and does very well. We're seeing a lot of the MAHA money and real programming happening at NRCS. Those of you who work directly with farmers may be aware that NRCS launched, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, launched a new regenerative agriculture program that producers can enroll in to help their bottom line, those that are opting in to do regenerative agriculture practices. So a lot of that is kind of taking place over at NRCS. In my last conversation with Dr. Hutchins, he kind of made that plain to me and said, yeah, we'll see what MAHA ends up doing. There's of course some conflict between some of the big ag interests and some of the MAHA interests. That he didn't say this, I'm extrapolating, but he did say, most of that is happening over at NRCS. But we'll continue to track it and see what happens if there ever is any kind of like research extension, outreach opportunities related to MAHA. I do think it continues to be of interest. Also mentioning that USDA is undergoing a reorganization and relocation process. That's going to, of course, slow things down. Hopefully NIFA and ARS, or mostly NIFA, won't be as terribly impacted because we already went through a relocation under the first Trump administration. So the hope is that it won't be as dramatic for our programs and for the things that we care about. But I will just also leave you all with, as far as grants and things go, we've heard from NIFA directly that they're really hoping to get back on track. They feel confident that they'll be able to do that over the course of the next year in terms of getting solicitations out on time, getting awards out in a timely manner, getting funding flowing in a timely manner. So they are all hopeful for that. The capacity and AFRI solicitations have already come out. There's also a brand new NSF and NIFA partnered solicitation focused on AI education for the general public that has a direct call out for working with cooperative extension, and they're going to put one in every single state. So of course, making you all aware of that, because I think it's great that cooperative extension is getting that kind of direct call out from other agencies. That's really huge and doesn't happen very often. And I think a lot of that is due to the advocacy that has been done by you all over the last couple of years to kind of try to diversify funding and find new funding streams and new excitement where we can. We already mentioned the Research Facilities Act solicitation is also on its way. So my last couple of final thoughts, again, major disruptions continue, but hopefully at USDA, they are clearing up a little bit. Again, Doug told the success story of the Research Facilities Act, and our next push is to do this again with capacity, is telling your story, submitting your stories into the database is really huge. I've heard from USDA and members of Congress that having those data points in their district is so critical. And so having that from the extension offices is the best way to make sure that it's not just the House member that represents the flagship university, but that you have stories from every corner of the state so that you can tell every single member of Congress, this capacity funding impacts you and your district and your constituents in this specific way. So that's huge. And then again, reiterating that members of Congress will be in the state, not in DC, a lot this year, a ton this year. So you will see them around, work with your government relations offices to invite them out, work with your deans and your extension leads to try to make the case. And again, we're really trying to push hard on capacity funding because we know that that equals bottom line services and support for you all. So that's kind of our big push for the upcoming next couple of years. So with that, I have my email as well. You all are welcome to reach out anytime you have questions, and we'll put it in the chat, and I can stop sharing screen so that everyone can see us and we can share for any questions. But I will leave it at that.
Perfect. I really appreciate it. It is a quiet group. There has not been a single question put in the chat. And I think it's set up correctly. So maybe we should just do an experiment. Somebody send something in a chat. I do want to I've got two questions, Christina. The first one being, are there any topics for those of us who may have opportunities or created opportunities to talk to our officials? Any topics we should avoid?
Oh,
Is there any
avoid.
Sam?
I was already going in my head to
Yeah.
for things
Well,
that you should
that'll be the other end of the spectrum of my question.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to knowing the member of Congress who you're meeting with. And a little bit of research, I would say, goes a long way. Hopefully, if it's, in your community and the member is the one that represents you, you know at least a little bit about them. I mentioned before a little bit of a controversy, especially around ag interested members with MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again initiative. We've had some Republican members that are very, very anti-MAHA and don't want to hear that acronym. And we've got some Democratic members who are even starting to warm up to the acronym. So I think that's one that I would be very careful before, the Secretary Kennedy is a part of the Trump administration, but not all Republicans love Secretary Kennedy. That's one of the most hot button topics. I would say you don't want to accidentally say that everything about MAHA is great to the wrong person.
Yeah.
But some people are all gung-ho and definitely want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Some Republican members especially, but some Dem members as well, are very conscious about spending money increases, that money has to come from somewhere. So just, I always, as a best practice, like to start with, we understand that budgets are tight. These are the services that are being provided, and here's the services that are lost by not making further investments. Yeah, I don't know, Doug, if you had anything else about topics to avoid.
Well, I'll tell you, Bernie, one of the best piece of information is go to your members' website. It'll tell about them, what committees they're on, what they're interested in, and that will help guide your conversation. You want to avoid anything that has to do with climate. And if you go back and look at the top 5 USDA research priorities, if you're in the ag world, talk about ag profitability. They don't really want to hear about ag production anymore. They want to know about, are we keeping our farmers profitable? And in many of our counties, it's those small-time farmers and ranchers that have off-farm income. You need to talk about that. I think talk about the successes of your 4-H program, and I think that's always a huge lead-in. Another negative, I agree so much with Christine about MAHA. If you go too far down that road, you may put yourself in a corner, because we do know that ag, health, and nutrition are important, but you got to frame it in a way they're going to appreciate. And I really think it'd be a huge mistake to say if we get cut more, we lose more people. You need to talk about program impacts and the ability to expand programs, and you're doing things that nobody else is doing. And I've never been really in a situation where a member has tried to put you on the defensive. And so I would just think about the positive things you can put in front of them.
No, I appreciate that. My other question is, it does not appear, obviously, based on your presentation, there really is not going to be any success in kind of recovering a little bit of SNAP Ed in the Farm Bill. Is there any discussions going on that we may not be privy to that maybe will enhance FNEP a little bit to kind of offset that loss of SNAP Ed.
Yeah, so that has been a push and something that a lot of members who receive FNAP dollars have certainly been advocating for that. We do acknowledge the reality that not all institutions receive FNAP funding, and I believe 1890 institutions receive them at a far lower rate. So acknowledging that FNAP is not a perfect replacement or a perfect solution, but in the absence of a perfect solution, I think our answer to that has been yes, advocating for FNEP, but also advocating for capacity funds allows for that work to happen as well. It's not specific to nutrition, but if the cooperative extension system really needs that level of nutrition support, then they are able to use, that's what capacity funds are for. They're able to use that to kind of cover that. So those have kind of been the two lanes right now, absent a brand new program or something like that.
I know some of my colleagues and I've talked from time to time, and we find it interesting that we thought MAHA might be a friend to SNAP Ed.
Yeah.
And to FNEP. And it is interesting to see how things have traveled down the pipeline and how it's emerging in different areas that I don't think any of us thought, really.
Yeah, and if helpful, I'm happy to talk a little bit about what happened and why SNAP Ed ended up on the chopping block. Because the One Big Beautiful Bill, it was what's called a reconciliation bill. And the thing about that is that type of policymaking mechanism, it has to be funding related, so they cannot do any policy. It can only be moving dollars and cents around. Legally, it's not allowed to be policy. And the Republicans set the rules for themselves that it had to be effectively budget neutral. I'm going to put a million asterisks next to that, but it had to effectively be on paper, if you squint, budget neutral. As part of that bill, it involved the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from the first Trump administration, as well as some increases and additional tax cuts. Tax cuts effectively cost the government money, essentially, right? If you think about it, because it's less money in. Because of that, okay, that swings if you're required to keep it budget neutral, that swings your cost in one direction. In order to offset those tax cuts, you need to cut spending somewhere else to bring it back to the budget neutral. The main source that they went to reduce government spending was entitlement programs, so Medicaid and SNAP. SNAP education is funded effectively as an offset of SNAP spending. If you cut SNAP education entirely, that added up to about a $500 million savings over the life of this bill. That was not direct food assistance, because they knew that when they were reducing eligibility and kind of messing around with SNAP eligibility, they knew that they were going to get hit in the news as they're cutting nutrition benefits. And so it really kind of came down to they either had to choose to cut SNAP education or choose to cut direct entitlement programs and direct nutrition benefits. So that's kind of how SNAP education became the unfortunate item on the chopping block, because it wasn't a direct nutrition benefit, but it was a big chunk of change that they could just lop off to help, again, make up for the tax cuts. So hopefully that's very in the weeds, but I think, you all deserve to kind of understand clearly how this came to be.
No, and it does make sense. It does make sense. But thank you. All right. I still do not see anything in the chat.
I see one question.
Oh, I see question.
Q&A. Yeah.
Yep, I'm just opening that up right now. And let's see. Can you see that question,
Yeah.
Christina?
So, what the question was about what topics for education and professional development for teacher, I think that would be the topics that they cannot be, avoid, like we were talking about before, regarding, talking about MAHA and talking about climate that was mentioned. I think somebody was following up regarding those topics. And Doug,
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you answered already that question. It's Bernie, if you see in the Q&A at the bottom, that's where the questions are. It's on the answered question. So,
Okay.
so if somebody has a question, they should ask it in the Q&A, not in the
Okay.
chat. I know that's confusing. I think it's changed recently with Zoom. So,
Yeah, but
uh,
I agree with Doug's response to the question
Okay.
about education and professional development for teachers. I think the feds are very interested in anything related to AI. Educating the AI ready America is kind of a term of art that's being used a lot here. Not just teaching people how to use AI, but what does the workforce that is AI proof look like? And I've had a lot of members of Congress ask, in meetings that I've been in with just university officials, they're very interested in what are students majoring in these days? Do you find that students are interested in kind of AI proof? Is that something that they're aware of? And so I imagine if you all have anything to that effect that you're experiencing with some of your 4-H students, are 4-Hers thinking about AI in this way? Are they thinking about AI at all? Are they thinking about their future in an AI world? I imagine members of Congress would be really interested in both that, but
Okay.
also how are you helping them work through those questions? Because
Okay.
nobody has a good answer to that. So,
Okay. That is great. That's really good. And especially on the heels of our 4-H Ignite conference that just wrapped up, there was a real heavy focus, obviously. So that's really good. And that NSF AI education tidbit was very, very good to have a little heads up on too. All right, I will going once, going twice. Are there any other questions people are
yes,
hoping to
there
ask?
is. There is
Okay,
another question from JD,
okay,
and her question is, I don't know if anybody wants to take it.
yep.
Cuts to the SNAP-Ed program at LGUs will affect 4-H numbers downstream, since many contacts are with youth. How can we leverage the youth work in nutrition education as
okay,
integral to youth development?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think as you're advocating, talking about the relationship between youth development and nutrition education is a great point. But I think in terms of leveraging it, again, that's kind of why we're pushing so hard on capacity. That's one of the many reasons that we're pushing so hard on capacity funding, because the capacity allows to fund for 4-H, but also for that interdisciplinary nutrition education that we know comes along with, especially if you're reaching, lower income students, or lower income kids and families. Being able to reach them through 4-H is such a great way to do that. And I think one of the goals is that the capacity dollars will allow for the flexibility to do that. But I also think that as you apply to grants and funding, if you apply to grants and funding from other agencies where you're doing youth outreach, discussing that aspect of it as you're trying to make the case that you're reaching these families and you're not only teaching them leadership skills, but a lot of times you're also reaching their entire families through this one touch point. And so I think that's a very, very compelling story to tell. Doug, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
Like I said, we're in a very difficult situation, and that we want to make sure that people understand the value of our programs and what we're doing. Politely let them know there are long-term consequences from lack of funding. We're looking at a whole clientele group that Department of Health and Human Services says that we need better nutrition education to solve chronic diseases and issues of nutrition, and yet they cut one of the major programs that allows that to happen. Extension does have what they're calling a Tiger Team that has been convened for not quite a year now to look at how we can step in and fill the gap. We are not saying let's rebuild SNAP education the same way it was. The administration has been very clear. We need to move on from that. We got to look at the future. We got to bring different scenarios and solutions. We're working closely with Lewis Burke Associates to see are there connections with Secretary Kennedy and all the things that he's saying about nutrition and health that we want to make sure he understands. We have a network of county extension offices, and educated professionals in those counties that can carry forward programs, but we need funding resources to be able to do that. So we got to take a long-term approach. Somebody asked about FNEP. FNEP is authorized, I think, is it 90 million, Christine? So we have about $20 million that we're asking for additional funding for FNEP. It's already authorized. That will no way replace the $240 million we lost in SNAP Ed funding, but it'll help us get started. And we're not sure long term if FNEP is the right tool or mechanism to do SNAP education funding, but we're looking at all avenues to help bring that forward. And I think we don't want anyone to lose focus. One, a lot of our legislators don't understand that cooperative extension and 4-H are part of land-grant universities. And so higher education on the federal level has taken a huge hit because of a lot of misperceptions about the value of a degree, the cost of a degree, the employability after you get it, student loan debt, all those things are talked about. But we don't really talk about, 4-H kids being ready to go to college, pay back in their communities, provide great leadership. And so I was talking to Jill Bramble and the 4-H Council staff about we need to re-engage what we learned in the tough study and let people understand really the value of 4-H. And if you look at this administration, they are worried about workforce development. But when they talk about, they say domestic workforce development. They are talking about, where's our workforce coming from? As Christina said, they want to know, do we have an AI-ready generation moving into college and then or post-secondary education and then into career fields? So we have a lot of work we can do. I think our challenge in extension is don't be so broad that we can't provide enough details on what we do really, really well. And we're going to be working on that over the course of the summer months.
Great. I am looking. I don't think we have anything open in Q&A at this point.
Nope. Nobody has any other questions.
So I would say, number one, thank you to everybody who tuned in, and a real special thank you to all of you for hanging in there through the technology glitchy things. Really, really appreciate it. Special thanks to Christina and Doug and Nick in a pinch. This will be recorded. So those of you who pre-registered, whether they made it to the session or not, will get a link to a copy of this. And Christina and Doug, will there be a chance that the PowerPoint slides would be available? Okay, perfect, perfect, perfect.